Welcome to r/MaliciousCompliance, where we share stories of people conforming to the letter, but not the spirit of a request. And today we have 3 great stories, so subscribe, hit the like button, and let's begin. The first story: boss lost a valuable employee and asked me to return. The second story: new consultant showed her character and lost her job. The third story: boss tells me to keep my nose out when I ask him to double check, then lost his business. And the first story is, you get what you pay for. I had my own company, where I had an excellent staff of 18 people. We did service maintenance on specific type of heavy machines to several locations. We were contracted by the company that makes them. This was part of their pitch when selling the items, that they had free unlimited amount of repairs and service calls for the lifetime of the machine. I had previous experience in this field, and I actually helped them get into some very well-known companies. As a consultant, I helped install them. After installation, they wanted me to temporarily service them until I could find staff. So I gave them my rate card and they paid it. It was not cheap, and it's a very specialized field that I spent way too long going to school and giving up my life to gain work experience in. Also, anyone in this service maintenance field gets paid very well too. All my workers were overpaid, and not one person quit for the entire 6 years. Their business got to be so big that I had to hire people, and I had this temporary position for just over 6 years. About the last year and a half, my team took out some of the machines from the smaller companies, as the companies never really used them, as they broke down often, and they were a huge burden. Because they were on lease, the manufacturer got them back. We all started to somewhat talk about what was happening. We discovered that machines made in the last few years were cheaply made. They were using a lot of out-of-country internal guts to keep things cheap, and more money for them. They didn't run the same, the fixes were not helping. We went back to the manufacturer and kept telling them what we were finding on site. They were disbelieving us. We told them to come out. They would not. We told them that our time was taking twice as long to repair. Still, they didn't believe us and told us that it was inaccurate reporting, and we were gouging them. As a result, they lost every small business owner, and the largest ones were not far behind. So the manufacturer told me that when our contract was up, we were going to be done. It was fine. I was working 2D much both on-site and as a boss, and I was exhausted. The day comes to hand and transfer all the parts and extra equipment, and we were all really kind and helping out with moving everything to their trucks. We were all very jovial and genuinely happy that the manufacturer was going to take the service, repair, and maintenance in-house, because we felt for that last year, they were not hearing us. Frankly, I think we were all done at that point. Of course, the owners were a bunch of sourpusses and barely got their fancy long-sleeve button-up with cufflink shirts dirty. I should point out that the manufacturer, who was just 3 owners that never could agree. They were insistent that the machines better be in the exact state as when they arrived. So, we did. We went to each site a week prior and removed all the repairs that held things together, like duct taping a small hole in the back that when light hits it, it shows an error. Yeah, we had no idea why they had designed an Achilles heel to shut down a machine with standard everyday beam of light, but we used to call it the Star Wars hole. Since they didn't believe us that we had to do these small little things to hold the machines together, we just removed it and let them figure it out themselves. So we cleaned all of our little machine hacks that kept the machines running and left. So we wiped our hands up with them and had a good party that lasted all weekend. It was so much fun, and I enjoyed putting it together. About 2 weeks later, I get a call from one of the owners, who whined to me that they couldn't keep their in-house staff on site because repairs were taking too long. They were confused, tired, and they were refusing to do that much work. And every machine had a problem that they couldn't resolve in time, and that all customers were complaining. So they asked me, just me, back to work for them. He offered me minimum wage. After laughing for way too long, I said no. I would like to mention that I don't want it ever to seem like I don't know how hard someone who gets minimum wage works, as I helped out a friend this year just prior to the pandemic and accepted minimum wage. I hadn't worked in a year, and my friend was in desperate need and didn't have anything to do, as I was just enjoying semi-retirement. It was all he could afford, and I was willing to do it until he could find a replacement. As an update, which is now about 7 months later, he called me today and begged me to help out with it. All the major companies except for one are backing out, and they want to rid themselves of the lease. He wants me to help him hold on to this last company. See, one of the things they did is that they started to charge for service calls, which was free and unlimited prior. No one is happy with them at all. I said no. I should mention that the owners fought all the time, couldn't agree on anything, fought in front of us, fought through emails, and fought on the phones with us. It was confusing because one would say one thing while the other said another. The last year and a half, they kept fighting with me that we were not being compliant to the requests, but that was hard as they constantly could not agree, which I consistently pointed out all the time. They claimed that I was charging too much and that I was lying on the amounts of hours we were spending, as we charged by the hour. The second story is, don't you ever tell me what to wear. Some years ago, the organization I work for brought in a consultant to make us more efficient and reduce waste. She was working across a number of teams, including the team I worked for. For our team, most of our work is office-based, about 75%, but we often work in retail environments and occasionally in industrial settings. The other teams that the consultant was working alongside all seem to be totally office-based. Some of the sites we work at can be quite dirty or smelly. Butchers are among the worst, and so we always advise people what to wear, as it's easier and cheaper to clean a pair of jeans rather than a suit. I was introduced to the consultant and was told she'd be accompanying me on a job. She seemed quite pleasant and was very smartly dressed. I talked her through the booking process and explained the work we would be doing. I suggested that she may want to wear casual clothing rather than business attire. She got extremely angry and said, "Don't you ever tell me what to wear," and told me that it was inappropriate to tell a woman what to wear. She was unwilling to listen to my justification. A few hours later, I was pulled into a meeting with my supervisor and our manager. The consultant had made a complaint to the higher-ups in our organization. Whilst my supervisor was supportive, as he normally was, our manager didn't want to rock the boat with senior staff, and so agreed to tell me why my behavior was wrong. Thankfully, it was agreed that no formal action would be taken, and there would be no record on my file. My manager agreed with the consultant that I shouldn't provide fashion advice and wasn't willing to listen to reason. Thankfully, it was agreed that she wouldn't come along on the job. About a month later again, I was told that the consultant would accompany me on a job, this time to an industrial site where I would be testing a piece of equipment. The site would draw steel from large coils and turn it into a bar. Whilst not the dirtiest place we go to, it's a long way from being clean. I felt this was the perfect opportunity for some malicious compliance. I emailed manager and asked if I could advise on appropriate clothing, and he emailed back saying that both the consultant and he had made clear I was not to bring it up, and to do so could lead to disciplinary action. The job I would be doing normally required a second person to record results. While I was doing the testing, it was agreed the consultant would be hands-on and record the results. An important point to note is that all industrial sites we visit will have a PPE requirement, with the minimum being protective footwear. Obviously, having been warned, I didn't mention this. The site was about an hour from our office, and I phoned as I was leaving to let them know we were on our way, thankfully in separate cars. They normally asked for a call so they could stop production just before we arrived to avoid downtime. As we arrived, we were met by the health and safety coordinator for the site, who did his intro. I produced my safety passport card, which showed I was competent in health and safety matters. I introduced the consultant and explained she would be assisting me whilst looking at ways my work could be delivered more efficiently. I took my overalls out of my bag and slipped them on over my clothes and swapped my shoes for my steel cap boots. The H&S coordinator asked if the consultant wanted privacy to get changed, and she explained she wouldn't be. He gave me a bit of a look, knowing that she didn't have a clue what was going on. He then asked where her safety shoes were, and she explained she didn't have any. He refused to let her down onto the factory floor, and she had to spend the job in reception. Once away from the consultant, I explained that if I had to log the results myself, it would slow the process down. He offered me one of his staff to do it. I then told him the story of what had happened previously. He thought it was hilarious what I'd done and wanted to play along. He asked for the details of a senior manager, and while I was testing the equipment, phoned to complain. He said it was unfair that he was supplying staff to assist me when he was paying for the job to be done. When I finished the job, the consultant had already left. When I got back to the office, I was pulled into a meeting with our director, my manager, and lots of other higher-ups, and was asked to explain myself. The director let me fully explain and thought it was ridiculous that I was blamed for the first incident. I also explained that I had email confirmation that I wasn't to speak to her regarding clothing. He said he was disappointed that I hadn't at least emailed regarding the need for safety shoes or raised it with the manager as a safety concern, but he'd understood why I made a point. I was excused from the meeting, and my manager came out a short while later looking sheepish and never mentioned the topic ever again. We gave the company a discount on the work for supplying an assistant, so they were happy. My supervisor later explained that the consultant had upset a number of people, and so her contract was cut short. The last story is, hire the Romanian? Are you sure? This was 5 years ago. The company I used to work for was a metalworks company in the southeast of England. It had a 40-strong team of fabricators and fitters. We were hiring for an electrical engineer for some automation that we were branching into. I was also the guy training the engineer in what system they would be using. Me equals me. Boss equals dipstick boss. European guy equals, I'll call him Gav for short. Supervisor equals workshop supervisor. I got word from the supervisor that they had hired a guy and he was from Europe. They warned me to speak slowly and clearly, as English wasn't his strong suit. I told them to check his documents to check he can indeed work. I was told to keep my nose out and do my job. When I had spoken to boss, he had a thick folder of pictures of electrical systems that he had built for home automation. I was a bit skeptical at first, especially as some of the pictures had stock photo plastered over them. I asked him to make sure he was sure about this, and if he had done the checks to make sure he was allowed to work. I was told the same thing. Keep your nose out of it and do your job. Okay. A month or so goes by, and I think he understood how the system works and how it should be used with all the safety systems in place, so we take him to his site and leave him to do his thing, while the rest of the guys get started on fitting security grill and railing all over the site. Me being the sucker, I agreed to help the rest of the team with the fitting and finished leaving our new engineer all alone. Big mistake. All power on the site cuts out, generator kicks in, all the lights come on and we discover smoke coming from the room where the fuse board is. An OF moment has just dawned on everyone. What Gav had decided to do was try and wire in the system to a 3-phase board without checking the board. Standard phase boarding right next to it. First red flag. This made the situation worse as he somehow blew the entire board up and had to explain to the electrician why he has to install a new board. The second red flag came in the shape of a van, filled with immigration officers, wanting to speak to Gav about him working when he shouldn't have been. I asked if they had any proof of it being the same guy, and it indeed was. I pulled the boss to one side and told him the immigration officers want to talk to Gav and the boss. I could see the terror in his face and panic in his voice as he said, "Call the new guy in so I can get rid of him fast." I politely reminded him that he should have checked before hiring him. He looked defeated. The immigration officers decided to wait around the corner, and just as Gav walked in, the vans pull in and swoop onto the poor man and slap him in cuffs. The officers then load him into the van and drive off. A few weeks pass by and the boss thinks he's in the clear. A few weeks later and he sent a letter telling him to make his way to the nearest home office building. To this day, I still don't know what they said to him, as he came back 2 hours later and closed up the workshop and never reopened, but it turns out he's still paying off a massive fine and couldn't afford to reopen. He was later arrested for tax evasion and fraud. Gav and I became friends, and the Home Office helped him become a British citizen with some help that they offered, so he wasn't removed. I hope you love these stories. Don't forget to subscribe if you want to know when the new video comes out.